so you can pull it down.
Sounds
Okay. Yeah. Everybody, while we're giving people a chance to log on, can you just introduce yourselves in this chat? Yeah, we're just about, okay, that's done. All right. So welcome everyone. This is our second webinar with Mr. Gellman. Mike Gellman is an extremely experienced nonprofit CPA who has spent many years training and consulting with nonprofits around financial strategy. And in this period of what he calls appropriately hyperchange and huge financial changes and constraints on nonprofits, he's developed, along with a partner, a set of strategies for coping and survival and thriving. And so the partnership has brought him on as a consultant to work with you guys both through a series of webinars. This is the first of 4, and also to do individual consulting with every partnership member that wants it. If you didn't see it already, you should have, and we'll send it out again after the webinar, seen an email with a link to sign up for the individual consulting. It will happen in 2 1/2-hour periods so that you can send him resources in advance so he can prepare, give you advice, and then you go back and incorporate his advice, and then he looks at your plan. And he's going to walk you through in today's webinar how to prepare for that. Even if you do not want to use his consulting services, we think that the resources and the tools he's going to show you how to use today will be really helpful as you do your work for coping during this period over the next however long this hyperchange period turns out to be. Mike and I worked together several years ago when he offered a core financial management training that members found really helpful. I've heard really wonderful things from members about the first webinar we did. If you were not on that first webinar, please send me or Jasmine an email and we'll make sure you've got the recording, because you need to see that webinar and prepare these documents before you do an individual consultation with him. We also have 3 webinars planned for the future that we have not scheduled yet because we wanted to get the consulting set up first. Those 3 webinars are going to be a 2-part series on the top 10 financial items you need to be dealing with right now, and 1 on working with your strategic your reserves and making strategic decisions about when and how to pull them down, and working with your board on that. If there are other topics you would also find helpful in webinars, let us know and we'll see if we can accommodate that as well. Our goal is to get you the really sophisticated nonprofit accounting strategic advice that you need, because we know this is a really difficult and challenging time. And I will just put in a little advert here for an email that either is going out today or already went out, because we're also revamping how we support your individual donor fundraising with our consultants, Mark and Aaliyah from C-Chain. If you haven't seen that, keep an eye out for it. We know we have to keep you alive and strong, but we also know we have to make sure you keep getting unrestricted dollars to do your lobbying. And so we're working on both of those things. Having said all of that, I am now going to turn this over to Mike, and he's going to share his screen and take you through this webinar.
Okay. Thank you.
There you go.
Good. And just make sure, Deb, that's up and running.
Yeah, you might want to take it full screen though.
There you go.
There we go.
Okay, very good. So I'm going to assume I was on the, most people have heard the introduction before, and just a couple things because it goes with today's presentation is that, I'll be running there to help you partner through. Won't be able to sit there for hours and hours, but try to be there. I get to do, work with lots of different nonprofit organizations my whole career. And I'm spending about a third of my time with organizations, working with the C-suite through issues like today we're talking, a third doing classes. I teach at Georgetown University, many other universities and different programs around the country and for different national nonprofits, and have taught a series of classes for Partnership for America's Children in the past. So we have a great relationship there. And I get to be in front of a lot of organizations that really helps and will be good because I can sort of see what other organizations are doing, talk to how we've worked through some planning. Today's webinar, I do before I get started, just some of the things I'm talking about here today, you'll see on the bottom of the cover slide that right down here, the sc4nonprofits.com. We're posting new information every week. It's a free service. There's an article I posted, a blog, A Week We Thought Today. Really like for you to see that. And I'll refer to that a little bit. And my email in the consulting company is Fiscal Strategies for Nonprofit. You'll see up here. So that's the two are linked together and such. Okay, so let's get going. We're dividing today into two parts. We're going to spend more of the time on the first part than the second part. The first part, we're going to talk about a new concept that we a little bit talked about last time from the hyper change and dealing with this and on continuity and sustainability. We're going to go in and we're going to step into this process of 3-month rolling budgets. What's the thought process behind that and such, and we're going to walk through this here. So that's going to be part one. There's a 2-step process down here. In part two, don't worry about the pieces. We're going to go through all this late as we go through. We're going to talk about setting up for the technical assistance sessions. Okay, we call them TAs, technical assistance sessions, and we'll be meeting with each of you. When I say you, it's really you and your organization. So you could have multiple people on the line, but it's going to be one organization, so it can be confidential. And we can plan together in a confidential environment. I am a CPA. I'll keep everything confidential and such. So we'll be one-on-one to an organization, and we're going to break those up into 2 sessions, and the sessions will run 30 minutes each. So there'll be some homework assignments before, during, and after, and I'll talk about that towards the end when we get into the schedule and procedures and how it's going to go. And so I will say this right up front, and Deb, if you could comment on this too, that this saves like the first 10 minutes of introduction on each session. So it's really good that we do this. And so, hang in there. We will be doing this sort of the setup for each TA and how it's working. And we do want to save time at the end for questions, but also Deb, will you monitor the chat box? We don't have 100 people on the line. I like to answer questions as we go because some people will ask really good questions that others are thinking about. And, we only have 60 minutes here. So if I go a little fast, you'll slow me down. Okay?
You got it.
Good. Okay, so let's go into part one. And part one is all about pivoting to short-term rolling 3-month budgets. And I just want to take a couple of slides here to talk about why we're doing this. A couple of these slides have come from the last presentation, and sort of the core premise of what we're talking about here is that we're in a very uncertain time. We're making a lot of rapid decisions, and we've got to overweight those decisions to favor what I call the number one priority, to favor our financial position. Because I believe at the end of the day, short of running somebody over with a truck right now, nonprofits can get in trouble really quickly in a financial way. And so it's the biggest risk most nonprofits are facing right now and such. And so, and we talked about this right now because we're still guessing, and we're at least 8 weeks plus now into this, depending on when you saw it. We've gone through almost all of March, definitely all of April, and now we're approaching mid-May. Okay. And a lot of the sheltering in place and shutdown, it all really was here by March 15th. So we're really into that first 2 months. And we're still not sure where we're going, how things are going to open up. Because just even if your state or your region or your county starts to open up, it doesn't mean that people necessarily are there or not. And so this impact that we have is longer term, and we're guessing on where we're going to be even a week or two from now, let alone 6 months or a year from now. So to repeat, we have to adopt a conservative approach that favors overweights the impact of our decisions on our financial position, our financial health. And so that's what we're going to be talking about here today. I pulled a couple of sentences from the blog I posted this morning. So this thing is really fresh. So if it was a loaf of bread, it would still be hot. Okay. And I just posted it. You'll see the date. It's weekly thought number 8 on the SC4 Nonprofits website. And the link is on the front of the slide. That, a lot of nonprofits are battling, groups that are not in the strongest position. They were not in the greatest, a lot of nonprofits, live day to day on their cash balances and such. And, and this crisis has really hit us from that point of view, even stronger organizations. But what we have to do is we have to pivot quickly to protecting these groups that don't have a lot of resources, that were really tight on accounts payable, before accounts payable just explode so much that we might get past the point of no return. Okay. On the flip side of that, we have financially stronger organizations that have operating reserves and such. We talked about that in the first seminar. And we still have to move just as quickly for those organizations, because yes, maybe they even have hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands, even millions of dollars in there. We're dealing with a situation we don't know where it's going. And you'll see that in that blog I talked about this morning, that I'm really just as worried about those organizations burning through all those funds. They go from being a strong organization to being weak. And so we're advocating for limited use of this. And this is what we would talk about in the one-on-one sessions. Groups that have operating reserves, we got to be careful how we call it metering out. There's an article on the website on this, and we'll talk about this. Is unique to each organization. Groups that don't have operating reserves, don't have a savings account, funds that you can get to, we got to really watch our accounts payable, our cash position. You've heard cash is king, even for-profits are talking about it. And so we're going to pivot to do that. And the way we're going to do that, both strong and weak, is move off of annual budgets, which we've been doing forever. This is the only time in my career where I'm talking about rolling 3-month budgets. We didn't do this in 9/11. We didn't do this with the banking crisis of 2008 and 9, because we don't know where this true recovery period is. A week ago, Deb, I reported also a blog that I was talking about, until we see true recovery, we got to be careful. And I talking that we'll probably go into what I call a pre-recovery phase. And there, I'm worried about there is that there's going to be a lot of starts and stops. The virus might come back in waves and things. And you know how, like, when you go into a recession, they don't know they're really in a recession until they've been into it 3 months. And so organizations that finally got through this first part, if they overcommit and then find out we're going to backtrack again, they might not, survive round 2. So we're really into this, and you can't have a rolling 1-week budget, So the 3-month is the key, and I'm going to take you through a worksheet on this, just like we took you through on the hyper change worksheet, which we're also going to be using. So because there's so much uncertainty here in the crisis and scope, we're going to be pivoting to this 3-month budgets until true recovery begins. And so I'm going to take you through a couple of strategy slides, and then we're going to spend most of the time here today walking through these templates and see how they work, and talk about even adjusting the templates. There's no template that works for every organization in the country. And I want to, I try to build it out so what I know about you, but I'll learn more as we go through. You'll be able to go and adjust the worksheets. So the strategy is short term. We're going to be looking at our sources of funding. We talked about that last time. We're also going to be looking how demand is changing. And remember, we broke that down in uncontrollable and controllable. And here's a new concept. We're going to be looking at because we didn't talk about this last time, we'll see this on the budget reports, how the impact's happening on our bottom line. And a lot of organizations, it's forcing them into short-term deficits where they haven't maybe been before, or the deficit's getting bigger. And we want to see how that's going to impact their financial health. Okay, So step front one is we're going to go through the framework assessment worksheet. That one has not changed since we last talked. I'm going to walk you quickly through that because we need to talk about these two pieces, expected changes in funding and how demand is changing. And even in the last 2 weeks, almost every organization I've ever talked with has, these expectations are changing almost day to day and definitely week to week right now. And as a,
I'm
yes,
going to interrupt you for a moment because we have a good question
sure.
from the chat box that I think you might want to just comment on here.
Okay.
Many funders require board-approved annual budgets. How would a rolling 3-month budget address this need?
Okay, really good question. And a lot of, nobody's ever pictured this. I would say I've addressed this with a lot of groups. We will still have our rolling budget. If you have a 12/31 year end, you've already got your budget in place for this year. I'm a little worried about the June 30s because we should have, if not already, prepare a budget for next year, and that's really tough. There's two strategies, basically A and B. Strategy number one, which has worked for a lot of organizations. We are just temporarily putting our annual budgets on hold and doing rolling 3-month budgets. And strategy number two is we're still putting a full budget out for boards to vote on. But we know that that budget is almost going to be worthless because we can't figure out where we're going to be 3 weeks from now, let alone, 3, 6, 9 months from now. So if we need to, we're putting out a simplified budget for next year with the best guess, but we know it's going to be changed. And like everybody else, we do that through projections and such. So I'm going to come off the slide for a minute, Deb, and I want to take everybody back through the framework. I apologize. I'm going to do this a little bit quick because we saw it last week, but I want to tell you this framework is going to be one of your homework assignments to try to start to fill it in a little bit. And I'm going to show you the key areas I want you to fill in. Okay. So let me share the framework again. Deb, while I'm popping this up, can I confirm that this has been sent out to everybody? And, oh, you're muted, sorry.
It was sent out on the general partnership ED list and development list. If you are not on that and you want me to send it to you right now, text me your name at 202-213-8981 and I'll send it to you right now.
And the reason the next worksheet we bring up after this is super important that people have. Now, of course, we can send these to you later, and you can find this worksheet on the website also, and I'll have this other worksheet posted up on our website in another day or so. Okay. Okay. We're going to work with, remember the framework? I love it because a framework is a thoughtful process to try to get your arms around an uncertain time. And people understand when you pull a framework together that you might change or probably will be changing the framework, but it enables you to document your thought pattern, while you're in that uncertain time. There's 3 steps in this framework. For what we're going to be doing in your homework assignment is just to do step 1 at the top right now. Okay. Understand that step 2, whether you're in a strong or weak position, we'll talk about that. That's a messaging drill. That'll be in our one-on-one sessions. And we'll talk about the super short and short-term actions. They will be done. We'll talk about those in our sessions. So what I'd love you to do is to be able to take a shot at filling this in. This is in a PDF. A lot of people will adopt this into an Excel spreadsheet. I don't care how it looks as long as we have it and whatever you like. Let's go over the 3 buckets again. This first column is our financial health, whether we're either in a stronger position or a weaker position. I really just want you to concentrate on these 2 buckets here. Looking at your balance sheet. Remember, the health of an organization only shows up on the balance sheet. And you can tell usually either weak or either strong. There's usually not too many in the middle. Strong organizations will have a lot of strengths and virtually no weaknesses. Weak organizations will have virtually no strengths and a lot of weaknesses. So a strong organization might say, looking at the balance sheet, we have a good cash position. Our accounts payable are low, under 60 days, 30 days. We have virtually no debt, or we have debt on a property. And restricted funds are under control. Like we don't have mostly restricted funds and we're having to dip into them. A weak organization will be listing down here and not up here. That cash is a constant battle, and it's getting worse because funding's been cut off. Okay, accounts payable were high even before the crisis. They had a lot of debt on the books and such, and they might be sitting on a lot of restricted funds that could be at risk. So I just want you to take this shot. You could have 5 items, 2 items here, and you don't have to pull your whole balance sheet in, but I just want you to take a look at that. I will be asking you to, and we'll talk about, to send your latest year-end financial statement, and I will help you from what I can see from a distance, what I see are strengths and weaknesses. But I really want to hear, before I over-influence you, what yours looks like. We can look at operating reserves later on together. Okay, so Deb, I'm going to repeat this. I wrote on this first column, I want you to take a shot, just simple, where you think your major strengths are and your major weaknesses are. And it's okay if you have just one or the other, because it's the way you usually fall. Of the 3 buckets we're talking about here, this is the one I want you to spend the most time on, and not that it will take a lot of time, but looking at your traditional funding sources, breaking them down, and don't think about fiscal years right now, because you could have been having a great year in February and then things are falling off. We're looking forward at the last, we're going to talk about natural quarters. So the natural quarter we're in now is the April, May, June, the second calendar quarter. But if you're a June year end, it's your 4th quarter. But we're looking at this natural calendar quarter. During this quarter, how are your revenue sources looking? And even for the rest of the year, are your grants rock solid? Or do you have some grants that are coming from private foundations that you might lose? That some organizations I've seen who are getting grants, people have just said they're not going to be able to give out grants this year. And there's other grants that are coming in, like if you were in the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP, and you've gotten some of those funds, that's even not a decrease, that's an increase. So you can even get some increases here. When I presented this in the beginning, the CARES and funds were not out there at that time. Now there's been state and local and county small grants and things and such. For example, I had a number of organizations that all the money was gone in about 30 minutes. But the U.S. Chamber of Commerce put out $5,000 grants to as many as they could, and they were all committed to. So a lot of organizations I saw got these $5,000 simple grants. So notice how I broke this down rock solid. It's like you're really sure this money is going to be here or not drop very much. There could be a bunch of things in here, like contributions from most groups are falling in here. They know their contributions are not going to be as high as last year, but they're not going to zero. And they're sort of putting that in here. And this could even be broken up between corporate giving, individual giving, private foundations and such. And the shaky things are things that like we know are being turned off. Some of the things we used to do in the past that raised a lot of money we might not be able to do, like an annual event or something. Okay, so don't feel that you have to use all 3 buckets. I'd like you to try to take a shot, and this is where I want you to spend most of your time. The last column here is really just this top bucket one is the most important to me for this first one. It's just of your major activities, do you see either an increase or a decrease in demand? Okay, and so if you have a community, I know you guys don't have this, but if you had a community food bank, we have an increasing demand for services, but our funding might be falling off. A lot of organizations are showing an actual decrease here because things they normally do, they can't do because their staff is down, capacity is down. The events, because of shelter in place, they can't hold them, and they're worried about holding them later on. There's travel or whatever. So I just want you to take a shot at listing the things that you feel are most at risk here. The controllable, uncontrollable, remember last time, this was just taking these and saying, hey, some of these are uncontrollable. It's not our fault that we had to cancel our 200-person event because, the hotels are closed, people can't come in, we can't do it, And controllable would be, could we do that event, change it and do it virtually, So how we're seeing things ramp up and down. I will tell you right now, it's not all doom and gloom. Some smaller organizations are figuring out that they can actually play in the sandbox with bigger groups and do virtual things, and they're actually competing really well with bigger organizations, and they can be nimble and move quickly. So there are some virtual things. Engagement across the board has been up virtually. It's different, and there's different costs. So we're going to look at that. So it's the top of this worksheet. We went through it last time. I know I did that real quick, but I don't want to spend too much time here because I want to spend the time for the new budget spreadsheet. Deb, I'm going to take a deep breath, drink some of my tea. And is there any questions?
Not at the moment. We did have a comment from Jason saying, when we did this, we added columns and put percentages for 2020 funding and 2021 and 2022. And certainly the percentages sounds like it makes a lot of sense to me because it gives the board a little more context.
Yeah, and whatever works. You'll notice how this one is mostly, this is all percentages and this one is dollars. It's just, we'll figure that out. It's really to get the juices going for you to think about how to do this. And Jason, I'm looking forward to seeing your worksheet because I believe in R&D, rip off and duplicate. If you've come up with a good way to do this, I will, this was put together from a lot of different organizations and such. And again, I will repeat myself. There is no one spreadsheet that'll work for everybody. Everybody's got a different style. So Deb, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So just give me 1 second. I want to go back over here. I want to share that. And Deb, while I'm doing that, if you could confirm that it's back up on the screen.
It is. And we also have a question from Jennifer in Maryland. Since we are so grant driven, is it okay to separately break out the vulnerability of each grant? And Jason says his percentage is confidence in funding, not percentage of budget, which was what I assumed, but confidence in funding certainly makes sense to me too.
Yeah, I love all these ideas. I can't remember the name of the person who asked that. What was the name?
The one about the grant driven, that was Jennifer. You know, should they break out each grant separately?
Jennifer, I talked about this last time. Very important to break out the grants, you know, because there's some grants, most organizations, you get multiple grants. There's a different scenario around each one. Some of them coming from the federal government are rock solid, and some of them maybe even increasing because of the paychecks program. There's other grants that might be coming from a private foundation, and that private foundation might be being devastated by this crisis, and they might cut your grants off and repurpose them to someone else. So definitely break down your grants. Think materiality here too. And if your funding is mostly from grants, you definitely want to break it up. You could break it up by funder, or you could break it up by activity. You get grants for education, grants for housing, grants for workforce development. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of different ways, and I look forward to talking with you about that. Okay, I'm going to move on, okay, Deb, because of the timing. This new step, well, now we're into brand new territory here because we didn't really talk about this last time. And this is how the rolling 3-month budgets work. Remember, we're sort of putting our annual budgets on the shelf. We don't want to have any governance issues. Think of this as a cross between doing rolling cash flows. Whenever we do cash flows, we usually do them in sometimes we do it in 12 months, but usually we look at 2-3 months at a time. It's a little more like that. We're just taking a peek ahead to see where we are based on what we know. And it's rolling 3 months because, like I said, today, I can't remember what day of the week it is. Today's Monday, right? You know, and if Deb said, tell me where we're going to be on Friday, I would have to let you down because I don't know. You know, and hopefully we will get to the point where we start to see true recovery and all. So I want to talk about this here. I really believe it's human nature. I've just fall back on this. It just works better. But we want to go on natural calendar quarters, even if you have a February year end. But most groups have like a June, December, September year end. We're going to look at natural quarters. So the first one we're going to look at, we're already well into the quarter, halfway, but it'll be April through June. And we're going to talk about this rolling quarter, and we'll get on a natural quarters to begin with. As we go through here, I'll tell you this right now, we will do the first 3 months. In the worksheet is the next 3 months, but we're not going to work on that now. We want to get the first 3 months under our belt. But somewhere about 20 to 30 days out, we wanted to start doing the next quarter. And this is, you see what I'm talking about, rolling. And we're going to be going through and doing a risk assessment. And everybody's heard this. Corporations do it. Everybody does it. Okay. I even did this when I was with my kids and going to college. What's the best case and worst case? You know, money. So, you know, they got a scholarship or they didn't. You know, best case, worst case, likely. I will tell you right now, because I am big into the optic. I don't like using the word worst, but I like using it on this presentation because it's got a uniform meaning. But in your final one, you might want to say the optimum case, in the least optimum case, you know, or whatever, because I just hate that word worst. Okay, but it works for now. So let's move forward. The best case scenario, in just so we understand, is I call it as everything plays out as expected, which is still lower. It's not your original budget. I don't want to see original budgets in the best case. So like Jennifer asked a question about the grants, and she said, boy, I got 3 grants I'm worried about. And in the best case, 2 of the 3 are going to be okay. And in the worst case, only 1 of the 3 is going to be okay. You see what I'm saying? So I want to give a lot of thought to these. I just don't want to see your regular budget showing up in the best case because we're not there. Things have come back. The worst case is, you know, just like conservative budgeting, you know, how will you go high on revenue, you go high on expenses and low on revenues and that kind of thing. Worst case is like, you know, anything that I think, don't put in worst case things that you know you're going to get funded no matter what. I mean, that money is going to come in. Don't leave it out. But this is what I call the low end. So think of this as the high end of where you think you're going to be. It's doable, and it's not 1 in a million. It might be like I have an 80% chance to get here, or 20%, you know, and a 20% of not getting, you know, whatever. That's the best case. And the worst case is the opposite. Like if everything really implodes and all my funding, you know, in the worst I can imagine, that's sort of down here. You know, it's tempered and such. What we're going to end up highlighting, of course, and what we want to show our boards and what you manage off of is somewhere in the middle. But I don't want it to be exactly in the middle for different lines. And if I get run over by a bus, I have to tell you this, very important, just remember this, that most things should not be an algebraic equation to take best case divided by worst, you know, plus worst case divided by 2 and come up the middle. Every line I want to show people thoughtful that, you know, like for example, in labor, I say, look, we want to try to keep as much of our workforce as long as we can. So we're going to go to the high side number on that, you know, and the worst case would be lower, but, you know, we might, our likely case might be 70% of what we thought or something. It's not going to be 50. So and this will all be explained in the key assumptions. I do, when you see the worksheet here in a minute, I really like giving a lot of thought to the best case and the worst case and explaining it to people. There are times when I don't even do the middle case. And you know why, Deb? Is because that's subjective. Sometimes there's a optics to saying, here's the best, here's the worst, and let people see the ends, but don't do the middle. We'll talk about that individually. You know, because then if you say, well, you're going to end up, you know, here at 40% or 50% and you miss, then they say you got it wrong, you know, but this way you just want to fall somewhere between the best case and worst case, and manage those results. So we'll talk about that. That's where we get into individual optics. You know, I don't like getting chewed out in a board meeting, you know, so I'm always thinking about that, but, you know, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, a couple more things before we walk through the spreadsheet. The risk assessment is really in these likely, you know, this what I call the likely case. We're explaining our key assumptions, and we're not going to be down to the last nickel. It's going to, and the word is key. You know, we're going to have 3, 4, 5 key assumptions. If we had 5 key assumptions, I want 3 of them, if not more, around the revenue funding, because then we're going to have to bring, you know, bring our expenses, try to bring them in line. So the key assumptions that we're going to be looking at from that framework, of course, is the funding sources. How are they reacting? Sometimes I had groups that had no funding drop, okay? But they were on a 6-month delay. And if they're tight on cash, it's virtually the same as if they lost the funding, right? So there's a lot of things that we have to look at. And that's why these 3 months are very important. Okay. And we see that within donations. There's a lot of donors who still want to comfort, and there's some people who come right up, but there's others that are going to be hesitant because they're out of work, you know? And so we have to look at this. So we're going to look at the impact on programs and capacity. Okay. So all these will come in and you'll see it on the spreadsheet. Okay. So I would like to walk through the rolling spreadsheet. Deb, I do want to ask for the no whining rules. We're going to put this up here. It's hard to fit the whole spreadsheet on a screen. So I'm going to move around a little bit. So if anybody says it's too small, they can't read it, you can virtually punch them, okay?
Oh, maybe I can offer a slightly less violent solution. You can pull it up separately on your laptop, because I did send it to you all, and look at it and make it bigger on your screen while listening to Mike.
Yeah. And I'm going to show you, I printed mine. This is the print on one page. I literally printed out, I carried this around. I have different versions. I made some adjustments for this presentation of what I knew. But again, I can't print one that fits for everybody. Okay, so I'm going to do one thing real fast. I'm going to go real small for a minute because I just want you to see that there's multiple sections, and then I'm going to make it bigger. That we have our budget-driven section at the top. We have a balance sheet here, and this is the best part here, is where we're going to be able to document our key assumptions and even talk about how it plays into the next 2 quarters. Okay, well, I'm going to make it bigger now. I just want you to know that even on the bottom of the screen, there's a place for the notes from the executive director and notes on the side and such. Okay, so let's go back to making it bigger again, and we're going to walk through here. We're going to spend most of our time on the top of the spreadsheet. And I hope you like this. You know, the no two spreadsheets are alike. I like the way, I think this is good. I hope you like my colors, but I'm just trying to make sure that things pop off the page and such. I tried to stay away from the color red, okay, because it has bad indications, okay? And so we have a very condensed, simplified income statement here. Revenues and support at the top, expenses here. Let me make it slightly smaller. And as you see, and we want to be able to see net surplus or deficits here. Let's just walk across. Notice there's 3 columns of 3. This middle set is for the April through June, which we're already halfway through, where we think we're going to be in this quarter. Worst case, best case, and likely in the middle. I do like to have as a benchmark, if you could quickly go ahead and drop in your last full year-end revenue expenses condensed. I have sections, you can take things out. If you don't have memberships, you know, take the line out, you can change things. You just drop in last year's year-end. Then you have your current year budget in that same format, condense it down. And then if your budget is divided into months, and it shouldn't be the same for each month, that if you could break out the quarter, if the crisis didn't happen, what that budget would have been originally built around. If you have that, that's okay. I'd love to put that in. My larger groups I deal with, this is all mechanical. They just drop it in. They have last year's numbers, they have the current year budget, and they have the budget broken down by months, so they can give me the April to June quarter for your budget. I keep saying last, I don't mean that, because if you're a June 30 year end, this is your last quarter. If you're a 12/31 year end, this is the second quarter, and so forth. Okay. We're going to concentrate on this bucket. We're going to leave the July through August. This will be something we would do in the early to mid part of June. And then in the future, I want you to do it about 30 days out before the next quarter. I just want to see how it's set up. Okay. So your major homework assignment, populate this so I can see this, but we're going to do this in the second session, not in the first session. The first session is getting to know you and figure out where your weak points and strong points are. And that's why I would love to have this filled out here in the first one. If you want to take a shot at this, I'm going to go through these steps and procedures in a couple of minutes. Okay. So let's go to the bottom. If you can, you know, I know the larger group's a piece of cake. I would like you to drop in your balance sheet because I'm assuming we're going to be doing most of these now for the March numbers. If you have those, you should have those out by now. So your March balance sheet, which have been your most current last balance sheet, March from the previous year, because I want to see if you're up or down. That gives me a 12-month look. And your last year end. Now I put June 30 in, but your last year end might have been 12/31 or September 30, whatever it is. So you have to change that. And you don't have to fill in anything else on the bottom. Just so you know, as you go across, this is going to be our key assumption area. And then where we can take some of our key assumptions and start putting numbers. These will be numbers, not dollars. You know, number of donors, number of grants, different ways to look at things, number of events, how many people, registrations, different things that we can look at. And it can be dollars too, because this key assumption information that we can talk to ourselves in the port about will come in and over here, how it plays across in these numbers. Okay, notice I always like to look at expenses programmatically, but for these rolling budgets, we're going to be looking at them by line item. And I always say the first two lines of expenses are payroll and payroll related costs. So it's going to be good here. I just took a shot at some generic lines. You'll go ahead and customize both the revenue and expenses to meet your organization. Okay, Deb, looking at you. Any comments like here? Because I got a number of slides I want to take everybody through so they'll know how this is going to work. I'm going to back off this, okay? You're muted, Deb.
We have one quick question, which is,
Okay.
do you report the investment gains realized or unrealized?
We'll handle that individually. But I will tell you, most of the time we're putting those things below the line because we want to, but we will put them in. And the groups that have investments and have operating reserves, there's going to be a whole bucket down below here. We're going to put that. I didn't put it on the first draft because it's hard to make one worksheet work for everybody, and then I have to take it out. So anybody with investments, operating reserves, we're going to have a couple of extra lines we'll add together in the middle of the worksheet. Good question.
And Jason also wants to know how this will differ from your cash flow projections.
This will be heavy cash flow and not as heavy accrual. It'll have some accrual in it, Jason, and we'll talk about that. And that's why I'm saying you could still keep your master budget in place. And this is our plan, but we'll talk about that as we get into it. Okay, just looking at the time, Deb, I'm going to push forward, okay? I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint slides.
Yep.
Can you confirm that they're back up?
Yes, but you need to take them to the full screen.
Yep, there we go. Okay, so let's go into part 2 now, setting up for the technical assistance session. This is about right. I wanted to have about 15 minutes for this and some other questions. Now we're going through how these are going to work, and we're going to refer back. So if you notice, there's a purpose, a format, procedures, and a schedule. It all sort of runs together, but I broke it up into 4 pieces. Okay, and we'll keep calling it TA, technical assistance sessions. Okay, so we're going to work with each organization. Deb, it's okay for people to bring in whoever they want to bring in. Larger groups, I've had like the director of finance, CFO, working with the CEO, different people on the line. Small organizations, it's just been one-on-one. You know what I mean?
Yep, I'll let them know.
Yeah. So, but it's organization based because we want to keep things confidential. Okay. Step 1, we're going to go through the framework worksheet assessment together and then set up for step 2, which is taking a first shot at those middle 3 columns. We talked about the natural quarters. Even if you have a February year end or a November year end, we're going to get you on these natural quarters, and it's going to work. And so we're going to set up for the first quarter and then talk about July and August are right around the corner behind it. And we want to set up for those about 20 to 30 days out before. The first one will probably run this closer because there's a lot of unknown here. And I'm assuming most of my groups, we're going to probably wait to even as late as June 15th before doing the July through September. Oh, that's a typo right there. Sorry, that should be July through September. So
I'll fix it.
I got it. I'm gonna fix it right now because it drives me crazy. Okay, so we're done. So we're going to do that and we'll go back. That was embarrassing. Okay, and that's what we're going to do. Okay, so let's go into the format. The format of the sessions are, be aware of this, and I know we can't do everything in an hour, but we're going to break up into 2 sessions for everybody, and we're going to have the sessions in 30 minutes. We're allocated an hour for most groups. You'll work with Deb if, just in case or whatever, but that's the way it's set up. And that's why it's important to try to get the homework done. So look at me as a signing post. I'm sort of good about this and bad for myself. I always give you extra time I can, and I encourage people to call me in between and all that. But we're going to be stacking the sessions one after another, or pretty close, so I can't go over too much. In session 1 is the risk assessment. We're going to go through that framework worksheet, the first document I showed today. And in session 2, it's going to be setting up for the 3-month budget and actually taking a shot at the April through June. Okay. So that's very important. And we're going to look, like Jason said, we're going to start to see, if you have operating reserve investments, how that's, hitting on our deficits, what we can absorb or not. Groups are not in a very strong situation. We got to try to knock these back as fast as we can. Okay. So the procedures are: attend the cohort webinar sessions. Most people have attended. People who have not, they'll at least read the recordings, because I think it's a little bit not time efficient for me to spend the whole first session setting up for what we're going through universally here. Okay. You need to sign up the individual sessions. I am not doing that. That's going to be done through staff. Correct, Deb? Everything will work, and Jasmine will be running that here.
Right. That's
okay.
Right.
So you want to make sure. And before first session, I got a checklist at the end that we'll come back to these, that I'll need these items. So I'm going to come back to them in a minute. I just want to go through a couple other things. So that's the first session, what we're preparing for. And it's really, you can see what I'm getting at. Doing that assessment. Are your funds up or down? What programs have you had to cancel? What programs are you adding? Going virtual and all that. And then I need some basic financial information so I can see. I have a checklist at the end, so we'll hit this up then. In the second session, it's going to concentrate on taking a shot at the 3-month rolling budget for April through June. Okay. And we'll be discussing, where are the funding declines, how we're doing cost alignment strategies, and how it will affect the balance sheet. That's why, the health of the organization's only on the balance sheet. That's why we have that on the dashboard. I will tell you that I'm really weird about this. I love dashboards, 1 pages. I don't like graphs on them. And if you notice, I'm cramming a lot on, but these dashboards are great. I apologize if I said this in the first seminar. I don't know if I did or not, but I use this analogy a lot. An NFL football team spends months and months getting ready for one game, okay, and game plan. Yet on the sideline, the coach has his laminated cheat sheet that, even with all the electronics and everything, this is going to be our laminated cheat sheet, our 1-pager that we're going to have. Okay. So that's how the second session is going to go. Okay. The schedule. You will work with Jasmine and, right, Deb, to get in and signed up for your sheets, your session.
Yeah. People will get an email from Jasmine with a link to a sign-up calendar. We'll make sure that in there are the links to the recordings to both webinars for the people who aren't on the webinars, and the links to the documents you need to fill out, and a list of the documents you need to fill out. And then you sign up. I think probably just sign up for the first session, and then when you're done meeting with Mike, go back in and sign up for the second one once you know when you'll be ready.
Good. And we're going to talk a little bit about that when we get to the checklist, a little bit about the timing and such, because I need to be able to look over things before our sessions. Okay. So I do want to talk to the schedule. Remember, so session 1 is really the risk assessment around the dashboard. Really need that in the financial information. We're going to hit a checklist in a minute. And then session 2 will be around the rolling budgets. And as we're discussing, we'll be able to time. But right now we're setting up for 30 minutes for each organization, an hour total. So we want to be really efficient with our time and such. So when I just want to talk to you about, here's the checklist. And I say this with all good intentions in my heart. The more you can do, the more we can spend the time on strategizing versus saying, hey, Mike, I wasn't sure how to get my balance sheet onto your spreadsheet. Can you do that for me? I'm not, you need to, and if you can get me this information ahead of time, I'm not asking questions that I should already be able to see some of this, and we can work more on strategy. But if I have to ask you, well, how's your cash doing? I should be able to take a look at your documents before we get into that. So there's 4 boxes you need to check here. Deb, you're going to make the PowerPoint available to people. This is the second to last slide. you know, for
We
them to.
are, but we'll also put this checklist right on the sign up.
Okay, so and I think the order of this is correct. I would really love for you to spend time on that assessment worksheet, those 3 columns at the top. Again, where you think you're weak or strong on your balance sheet, how your funding sources are reacting, and then your biggest programs, how they're changing, moving, delays, on hold, canceled. I want to see that. And then these are pretty easy because you should have these. I just want from financial statements, I really like this to be your year end. Actually, I'm gonna, I really want this to be your last year end. Okay, I really want this to be the last year end, sorry. Report. And you can also send me your, I will see the most current, but you could also send me your most current. But I definitely want to see the last year end where that's at. Then I want to see, your last 990. If you happen to have a draft and it's really the last 990 just hasn't been filed yet, I'm not going to, nobody share it with anybody. I want to see the latest 990 you have, even if it hasn't been filed. And then your current annual budget. And I don't need to see 52 pages. I need to see the summary or the top of it just so I can get a flavor, how big or where you're at, some of the things you're doing. So again, this is the only one that takes time. These are just gathering the documents and sending them to me. If you have your last year end was June a year ago, I would like to see a more current statement. You will be putting this on the report for the budget report for the second session. Then when we get to the second session, and I'm going to pop it back up, and you're going to take a shot at developing your key assumptions that, these 3 revenue sources are really being impacted. These 4 programs are really being impacted, and complete your 3-month rolling budget. And then we want to see how, has it balancing? Is it coming in as a deficit? How's that looking? And then we'll compare that to your balance sheet. Okay, so that's the checklist. I want to do 2 things before we wrap up here. One, I did want to make a statement, and this is it. It's sort of similar to last time, that the purpose of the TAs and the rolling 3-month budgets is to give the board of directors and yourself confidence that the senior management team has taken a thoughtful, objective approach during a time when it's crazy right now, and that we're being conservative to protect the organization's financial position. And that both this rolling 3-month budget, because we'll be out of this quarter before you know it, and into the next one, we're going to keep pivoting and changing and reacting. Because right now it's just, I just have never seen things where it's been like, we just can't figure where we're going to be. And even if you feel like you're in a good shape, supply chain issues, psychology, everything. I've had organizations say, oh, we're actually, things are up, but there's other issues that are going to hit them later on or something. And it's just a super changing environment. Okay. Deb, I want to do one more thing, if I may. I just think it's important.
Go for it. While
Just,
you're setting that up, I will say the one thing that we have not seen you guys even start really to have to grapple with is the state budget cuts that are inevitable and that are going to affect a lot of your allies, and that may in turn affect your financial position. So we know that you're going to have to keep making changes, that things are going to keep changing. We just don't know which way and how that'll cut. Anyway,
it was really interesting in the 2008-2009 banking crisis. I do a lot of national programs, and group in California got really hit hard back then. And a lot of other states were sort of okay. They had overdevelopment and all that, and they're just crushing them. And so the West Coasters really had a big impact, different than most of the rest of the country, but it was interesting. So when you go back to this is where this key assumption thing is going to come in. And here the words are going to be more important than the dollars. They're just talking about using this, what you write in here, plus using what you put on the framework, and where you think your funding sources are going. And it's a combination of these. We're gonna do the best we can at, reading the tea leaves and make choices. But in these 90 days, we're going to make these choices. You know, a year from now, we're going to look back and see if they were good. But if we're doing it only 90 days at a time, this first one's really 45 days, you know, we're lowering the risk that we made a big play and got it totally wrong. You know, the last thing I'm going to finish with is coming out of the last two crises. The one uniform thing I think most nonprofits got wrong is they took too long to react and realize it was a longer term situation and burned through more assets or got deeper on accounts payable before they could react. And this hopefully will help us to react quicker. So Deb, I'm back to you. Just going to pop open the PowerPoint and let them know that my email address and everything is on the front page. You'll also share that in your, you know, in your communications and such.
Right. So everybody, does anyone have any other questions right now? What you'll be getting, we have set up a second Zoom line so that we can schedule consultations with Mike without worrying about conflicting with other stuff. Jasmine's in the middle of that. As soon as that is completed, which should be, I think, in the next day or so, you'll get an email to sign up for the individual consulting times, but you can go ahead and start preparing your materials right now. This is technically first come, first serve, but we will make as many resources, you know, as much of Mike's time available as he's able to give us to meet members' needs, because we really think it's important that you guys all have the opportunity to take advantage of this kind of strategic planning. Jasmine, do you know when the Zoom will be finalized? When the email can go out?
Hi everyone, the Zoom is set up. I just need to put the Zoom link on the Sign Up Genius schedule, so that can go up by tomorrow.
Great. So keep an eye out for it, and then as soon as you get it, sign up so that we can let Mike know when we've made appointments for him. We will put all the things that you need to do in the email and on the sign up, so it should be pretty straightforward. If you participated in the webinar because you wanted the strategy for looking at it but are not going to do the consulting, let me know. I'm going to be reaching out to people who signed up for the consulting but didn't join the webinar. I know there are a few of those. And also let us know if there's other webinar topics you want us to address, you know, other issues that you want to think about besides the top 10 financial things you should be doing and the working with operating reserves. Otherwise, I don't see any questions, and I hope this was all helpful. If you have questions as you work on the documents, Mike, do you want those directly or do you want them to come to us and we'll put them together for you?
That's a good question. Let's decide that right now. I would prefer people send them to me in one email. I know for confidentiality purposes, other than the 990, which is a public document, everything else is not. On the other hand, I would really prefer that you be the clearinghouse, you know, because it just saves me time and you'll know who sent documents through. So if other than the confidentiality, I prefer they clear through you so you can check to see they got the 4 pieces and send them over to me. And it saved me a little bit of time so I can spend more time working with them instead of figuring out who didn't send what, you know, and all that, you know.
So send them to me. If you're not comfortable sending them to me, send me a note telling me you're going to send them to Mike. But if you can just send them to me, that's probably better. The other thing is you need to get the materials to Mike 48 hours before the actual session. And the reason for that is he's going to review them and be ready to talk with you when you get on the actual Zoom call. And that'll be the most productive use of your half hour with him. So, but you know, he needs time to prepare. So please get him the materials 48 hours in advance. And again, we'll put that on the signups calendar as well. So you're thinking about that as you schedule your time.
Right. And when you say review, I will do the best I can, but I'm not going to be able to spend hours on each set of documents, you know.
Right. But you do need
you know,
a chance
I would like to be able to look at them real quick and think about it and not do it 5 minutes before the session starts, you know.
Exactly. And if for some reason none of the time slots are going to work for you, email me and we'll find with some times that do, and we'll see what we can work out. Any questions about the process for this? No, I think we're good. All right, Mike, thank you so much.
Sure.
And we'll get the scheduling email out tomorrow, and then we can move this ahead.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, and have a great day, everybody.